My name is Jonathan Reed, and I am 62 years old. On the night of July 10th, 2025, my life was forever changed. That was the evening when I experienced a sudden medical emergency, what the doctors later called a fatal heart attack. For nearly 12 minutes, my heart stopped, and during that time, I had an encounter with Jesus that shattered every assumption I had carried for decades about my faith, my readiness, and the rapture of the church. For over 40 years, I considered myself a faithful Christian. I had grown up in a devout home in North Carolina, where my father was a church elder and my mother led children's ministry. Faith was more than a Sunday activity. It was woven into the fabric of our daily lives. From morning devotions to family prayers before bed, our home revolved around Christ. At the age of 15, I gave my heart to Jesus at a revival camp, and the peace I felt that evening left me convinced that I was forever secure in Him. Years later, I married my high school sweetheart, Mary, who shared my devotion to Christ. Together, we raised 3 children in the faith. We never missed church unless sickness forced us to, and we served in almost every ministry available, teaching Sunday school, leading Bible studies, organizing prayer meetings, and helping with outreach programs. For decades, I was known as the Bible prophecy guy at our church. I could quote 1 Thessalonians 4 and 1 Corinthians 15 from memory, and would often remind people to be watchful for the coming rapture. I lived in the confidence that when the trumpet sounded, I would be among those caught up to meet the Lord. I was proud of the life I had built, a strong marriage, children walking in faith, and a reputation as a man deeply committed to Christ. Yet as I entered my 50s, something began to change. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the fire that had burned so bright in my youth began to fade. At first, it didn't seem like a big deal. My prayer life became shorter and more mechanical. Bible reading turned into a duty rather than a delight. I no longer wept over the lost or felt urgency about Christ's return. Instead, my focus shifted toward earthly security, retirement plans, savings accounts, and the comfort of a predictable routine. I told myself this was maturity, a natural settling down after years of spiritual zeal. But in truth, I was drifting. Looking back, I realized I was coasting spiritually. I had stopped pursuing God with the hunger of earlier years. I had grown complacent. And the saddest part is that I didn't even notice it happening. My life looked good from the outside. Faithful church attendance, consistent tithing, and ministry involvement. But inside, my love for Christ had cooled into religious routine. On that March evening in 2024, after a typical day of reading my Bible and saying my short prayers, I went to bed at peace with myself. But at around 2 a.m., a crushing weight fell on my chest. Pain ripped through my body, my vision blurred, and words failed to leave my lips. I tried to call for Mary, but couldn't. Darkness began to swallow me, and in a desperate whisper I prayed, "Jesus, if I'm dying, please don't let me be left behind." That prayer revealed something I hadn't admitted to anyone, not even to myself. Deep inside, I wasn't sure if I was truly ready for the rapture. Despite all my knowledge, all my years of service, a gnawing doubt lingered. Then suddenly, I found myself in a place beyond description. It wasn't light or darkness, as we know them, but something beyond both, alive with truth and holiness. The weight of God's glory crushed me to my knees, and I could not stand. Then I saw Him, Jesus, radiant with authority and majesty, His eyes burning with both love and sorrow. When He called me by name, Jonathan, it felt like home, yet His tone carried a heaviness that filled me with dread. Before I could speak, He asked me a question that pierced my soul. "Jonathan, do you know why most of my people over 50 will miss the rapture?" As He spoke, the space around us shifted. I saw millions of believers gathered, people who looked like faithful Christians. They held Bibles, sang worship songs, and attended church. From a distance, it was beautiful. But as Jesus drew me closer, I saw the chains. These were not chains of iron, but chains of something far more subtle. Comfort, complacency, spiritual pride, family idolatry, and compromise with the world. Worst of all, the people bound by them, didn't even realize they were trapped. They worshipped and served, convinced they were ready, while their hearts had grown distant. Jesus then began to show me 5 groups of believers, each trapped by these invisible chains. The first group mirrored my own life. These were people who had made idols out of comfort and security. They were faithful in outward appearances, church attendance, tithing, and service. But their hearts were more devoted to retirement accounts, possessions, and earthly stability than to Christ. Their prayers were shallow, centered on protecting what they had, rather than seeking deeper intimacy with God. The second group was chained by spiritual pride. These were people with deep biblical knowledge and years of service, yet their knowledge had puffed them up. They looked down on others, judged newer believers harshly, and considered themselves guardians of truth, without realizing how pride had poisoned their relationship with God. The third group was caught in religious routine. Their prayers were recitations, their Bible reading a checklist, and their service a duty. Outwardly, they looked committed, but inwardly, they had lost their passion. They had replaced living relationship with stale routine. The fourth group shocked me most. These were believers who had allowed family to take Christ's rightful place. They compromised their faith to keep peace in their homes, avoided conversations about sin, and gradually shifted their identity from being followers of Christ to simply being family members who occasionally practiced religion. The fifth and final group was bound by compromise with the world. They hadn't abandoned Christianity outright, but they had lowered their standards so much that their lives were nearly indistinguishable from unbelievers. Their love for Christ had grown cold, and yet they still considered themselves ready. When I saw these 5 groups, my heart broke. Then Jesus turned to me and asked, "Jonathan, which group do you belong to?" The question hit me like a thunderbolt. With tears streaming down my face, I realized the truth. I saw myself in all of them. When Jesus asked me, "Jonathan, which group do you belong to?" it felt like my soul was laid bare. I could not hide behind decades of church service, Bible knowledge, or community reputation. Every mask was stripped away, and I saw myself for who I truly was. With tears streaming down my face, I whispered, "Lord, I see myself in all of them. How did this happen? How did I drift so far from you without even realizing it?" His reply was both gentle and devastating. "Because you stopped watching and praying. You trusted in your past experiences rather than pursuing present intimacy with me. You fed on yesterday's manna, but no longer sought fresh bread daily. You began living like this world was your permanent home, instead of a pilgrim passing through." As he spoke, scenes from my own life played out before me. Years where my passion was replaced by routine. Moments when I chose comfort over conviction. Times when I stayed silent about sin to avoid family conflict. And countless days where I sought security in my bank account rather than in Christ. Then Jesus said words that I will never forget. The rapture is not about escaping tribulation. It is about being ready to meet me face to face. Many of my people have allowed their lamps to go out while they sleep. Comfort, complacency, and compromise have robbed them of readiness. He then showed me another vision, this time of those over 50 who were ready. Unlike the first 5 groups, these believers had refused to let age dull their hunger for God. They pressed forward with urgency, even when their bodies grew weak. They did not coast on their past victories, but sought fresh encounters with God every day. They remained pilgrims, longing for a better country, a heavenly one. I asked desperately, "Lord, is it too late for me? Is it too late for others like me who have grown lukewarm?" His eyes, filled with both sorrow and compassion, met mine. "It is not too late if you awaken to your true condition. There is still time for those who will repent, confess their compromises, and seek fresh fire. They will experience what seems like a second conversion, not because they were never saved, but because they had drifted so far from me that they must be rescued again." I then saw people on their knees, older believers weeping over their complacency, crying out for God to rekindle their love. They confessed their compromises, renounced their idols of comfort and family pride, and begged for renewed intimacy with Christ. Their faces lit up with a fire I had not seen in years. Jesus said, "These are the ones who will be ready. They have oil in their lamps. They long for the bridegroom more than for anything in this world." The vision began to fade, but before I returned to my body, Jesus left me with a final instruction. "Go and tell them. Tell my people to wake up before it is too late. Comfort is the enemy of readiness. Complacency is the thief of vigilance. Compromise is the poison that dulls the bride's heart. Warn them to return to their first love." With that, I was suddenly aware of my body again. My chest heaved as air filled my lungs, and I opened my eyes to see Mary holding my hand, sobbing uncontrollably. The doctors later told me they had declared me gone, but then my heart inexplicably started beating again. From that moment, I knew I had been given a second chance, not for myself only, but to warn others. The transformation in my life was immediate. My prayers, once brief and mechanical, turned into hours of weeping, seeking, and worship. My Bible reading, once routine, became a desperate pursuit for God's voice. I no longer wanted to teach prophecy as an intellectual exercise. I wanted to live every day as if Christ might return that very night. When I shared my experience with my Bible study group, the reactions were mixed. About a third were deeply convicted. They recognized themselves in the 5 groups Jesus had shown me and began asking serious questions about their spiritual state. Another third listened politely but remained skeptical, dismissing it as just an emotional experience. The last group became defensive, even angry. One man, a longtime deacon, accused me of preaching fear and undermining the doctrine of grace, but I could not stay silent. I told them, "The 5 reasons Jesus showed me are not theories. They are warnings from heaven. Comfort can become chains. Knowledge can puff up into pride. Routine can replace relationship. Family can become an idol. And compromise can slowly poison our hearts until we are indistinguishable from the world. This is why many over 50 will miss the rapture, because they have grown comfortable instead of hungry. Some were shaken, others resisted. But I knew my mission was not to convince everyone. It was to obey Jesus and warn the church. In the months since that encounter, my priorities have changed completely. I live each day with urgency, not fear, but a holy anticipation. I wake up asking, "Lord, if you come today, am I ready?" I weep for those who have grown lukewarm and pray daily for the fire of revival to ignite in older believers who have begun to drift. I used to think the rapture was primarily about escaping tribulation. Now I know it is about meeting the bridegroom. The question is not whether we have church attendance or decades of Christian service on our record, but whether we still burn with love for Christ. My testimony is not a pleasant story. It is a warning. If you are over 50, do not assume that years in the faith have secured your place. Do not let comfort, pride, routine, family idolatry, or compromise steal your readiness. Jesus is coming soon, and only those with oil in their lamps will hear his call. Come up here. Time is running out. Wake up before it is too late.